The phone call from my mother came at 3 in the morning, and her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her through the tears. "Andrew, we're trapped," she whispered like she was afraid someone might hear. "They've locked us on the boat. We can't get out. There's a chain on the dock gate." I sat up in bed so fast it woke my wife, Felicity. The moonlight through our bedroom window in Charleston, South Carolina, caught the confused concern on her face as she pushed her auburn hair back from her eyes. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, trying to make sense of what my 74-year-old mother was telling me. "Mom, slow down. What do you mean locked on the boat? Where's Dad?" "He's here with me. We're on the Sea Dream at the Palmetto Harbor Marina. Andrew, there's a padlock on the gate. We came back from dinner and found it locked. There's a note saying we violated HOA regulations and we're not allowed to leave until we pay a $10,000 fine." Her voice cracked. "We've been here for 6 hours. Your father tried to climb the fence, but his knee gave out. I'm scared." My parents had retired to Mount Pleasant, South Carolina 2 years ago, buying a beautiful slip at Palmetto Harbor Marina with their life savings. They'd always dreamed of living on a boat, spending their golden years sailing the Carolina coast. The marina was part of a larger planned community called Seaside Estates, governed by one of those increasingly common and increasingly aggressive HOAs. "I'm coming right now," I said, already pulling on jeans. "Have you called the police?" "We tried. They said it's a civil matter between us and the HOA. They won't get involved unless someone's in immediate danger." Felicity was fully awake now, her sharp gray eyes taking in my frantic movements. As a federal judge for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, she had a way of assessing situations with lightning speed. "What's happening?" she asked quietly. I covered the phone. "The HOA locked my parents on their boat. They've been trapped there for 6 hours. Her expression went from concerned to cold in an instant. That was the look I'd seen her wear in the courtroom when someone was about to face serious consequences. "Get dressed, we're going." The drive from Charleston to Mount Pleasant normally took about 25 minutes, but I made it in 18. Felicity sat beside me, already pulling up South Carolina property law on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. She'd thrown on jeans and a simple blouse, but even in casual clothes, there was something commanding about her presence. "This is illegal imprisonment," she said without looking up. "False imprisonment under South Carolina Code, Section 16-3-910. Also violates federal civil rights statutes. If your parents are being held against their will, the HOA board members are committing a crime." The police said it was a civil matter. The police were wrong. Her voice had that edge it got when she was furious, but controlling it. Whoever told them that either doesn't know the law or doesn't care. Either way, we're going to fix this. Palmetto Harbor Marina was nestled along the Wando River, a sprawling complex of floating docks that housed everything from modest sailboats to million-dollar yachts. The entrance to the marina was through a large gate that was normally open during the day and accessible by key card at night. When we pulled up at 3:45 in the morning, I could see the gate standing closed and beyond it, the maze of docks stretching out into the darkness. My parents' boat, a 32-foot islander named Sea Dream, was moored at Dock C, Slip 17. I could see lights on in the cabin from where we stood at the gate. I tried my own key card, the one my parents had given me for emergencies. The reader light stayed red. They'd deactivated it. "Mom, Dad, we're here," I shouted across the water. A light came on in the cockpit, and I saw my father's silhouette emerge. Even from a distance, I could see he was moving stiffly. Dad was 76, a retired high school English teacher who'd spent his whole life in Michigan before they moved south. The warm climate was supposed to be easier on his arthritis. "Andrew!" His voice carried across the still water. "Thank God, we can't get to you. The gate to the dock itself is locked too, not just the main entrance." I looked where he was pointing and saw what he meant. Each dock had its own security gate, and sure enough, there was a heavy chain wrapped around the gate to Dock C, secured with a serious padlock. Felicity was already taking photos with her phone, documenting everything. "Andrew, call 911 again. Tell them we have 2 elderly people being illegally detained, one with mobility issues who may need medical attention." I made the call. This time, I emphasized that my father had fallen trying to escape, and that my mother had high blood pressure medication she needed from their car in the parking lot. The dispatcher said they'd send someone. While we waited, a golf cart came humming down the path from the main clubhouse. The woman driving it was somewhere in her late 40s, with blonde hair styled in that aggressive bob cut that somehow always screamed entitlement. She wore a navy blazer with a name tag even at this ungodly hour. The tag read, Brenda Morrison, HOA President. Perfect. A Brenda. Of course it was. She parked the cart and approached us with a clipboard, her expression one of practiced disdain. You must be the Caldwell's son. I'm afraid your parents are in violation of multiple community regulations. They'll be released once the fines are paid and they sign an agreement to comply with all future. Stop talking, Felicity said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through Brenda's speech like a knife. You're currently committing a felony. False imprisonment is a serious crime in South Carolina, and you are also violating federal civil rights law. I suggest you unlock that gate immediately. Brenda looked Felicity up and down with barely concealed contempt. And who are you? Judge Felicity Norton, Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals? Felicity didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. And you are? The color drained from Brenda's face, but she recovered quickly, puffing up like an angry hen. I don't care if you're a Supreme Court justice. This is HOA business, and we have the right to enforce our regulations. The Caldwells were warned multiple times about their violations. What violations? I demanded. Brenda consulted her clipboard like she was reading a criminal indictment. Their boat exceeds the allowed length for their slip by 8 inches. They hung laundry on their lifelines in violation of aesthetic standards. They had visitors who stayed past the 10 p.m. curfew on 4 separate occasions. And most seriously, they refused to pay the special assessment for new dock lighting. So you locked 2 elderly people on their boat in the middle of the night. I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. They were given multiple warnings. The HOA board voted unanimously to take enforcement action. It's all in the bylaws they signed when they purchased their slip. Brenda's voice had that self-righteous tone that made me want to throw something. We have every legal right. You have no legal right to imprison people, Felicity interrupted. I don't care what your bylaws say. You cannot supersede federal and state criminal law with HOA regulations. Unlock the gate now, or I will personally ensure you face criminal charges. Brenda crossed her arms. I'm not unlocking anything until the Caldwells pay their fines, $10,000 plus a $2,000 gate release fee. I heard sirens in the distance. The police were finally coming. Felicity stepped closer to Brenda, and despite being 3 inches shorter, somehow seemed to tower over her. Let me be very clear about what's going to happen. Those officers are going to arrive, and I'm going to explain to them that you are actively committing false imprisonment. You will be arrested. Your HOA board members will be arrested. You will face both criminal and civil liability. The Caldwells will sue you personally and the HOA corporately for false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, elder abuse, and violation of civil rights. I will make sure this case goes to a judge who takes these matters very seriously, because I will personally recommend one. And when you lose, because you will lose, the damages will be substantial enough to bankrupt your HOA and possibly you personally. Or you can unlock the gate right now, apologize, and we can discuss this like rational adults. 2 Mount Pleasant police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their lights painting everything in alternating blue and red. 2 officers got out, and I recognized one of them as Officer Marcus Chen, who'd helped my parents with a fender bender in the marina parking lot a few months ago. Officer Chen, I called out, my parents are locked on their boat. They've been trapped there for over 6 hours. Officer Chen approached with his partner, a tall woman whose name tag read, Officer Rodriguez. He looked at the locked gate, then at Brenda, then at my parents visible on their boat in the distance. Ms. Morrison, he said with a sigh that suggested this wasn't his first encounter with Brenda. Did you lock residents on their boat? They're in violation of HOA regulations, Brenda said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. We have the authority to restrict access. No, you don't, Officer Rodriguez said flatly. She'd been listening to Felicity. You can't imprison people. That's illegal. Unlock the gate. I want to see your supervisor, Brenda demanded. You clearly don't understand HOA authority. Officer Chen pulled out his handcuffs. Madam, I'm going to ask you one more time to unlock the gate. If you refuse, I'm arresting you for false imprisonment. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. That's not a get-out-of-jail-free card, Officer Rodriguez said. Unlock it now. Brenda looked around like she expected someone to come to her defense, but the marina was empty except for us. Finally, with shaking hands, she pulled a keyring from her blazer pocket and unlocked the padlock on the dock gate. I rushed down the dock, Felicity right behind me. My parents met us at their boat and Mom collapsed into my arms sobbing. She felt so small and fragile. Dad looked exhausted, his face gray with stress. Are you okay? I asked. Did you hurt yourself falling? I'm fine, Dad said, but he was clearly in pain. Just bruised my pride and my knee. Officer Chen had followed us down. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, do you need medical attention? No, we just want to get off this boat, Mom said. We just want to go home. You live on the boat, right? Officer Rodriguez asked. We do, Dad confirmed. But right now, we need to get our medications from our car, and we need to sleep somewhere that woman can't lock us in again. Back at the parking lot, Brenda was on her phone, her voice rising. Yes, I need you here now. These people are threatening the HOA. Bring the whole board. This is an emergency. Officer Chen approached her. Ms. Morrison, you're going to need to come to the station and answer some questions. Am I under arrest? She sounded incredulous. Not yet, but we need to document what happened here. False imprisonment is a serious allegation. I'm not going anywhere. Brenda's voice went shrill. I have rights. I'm protecting this community. From what? Felicity asked quietly. From elderly people who want to live on their boat in peace? From people who think rules don't apply to them, Brenda shot back. If everyone just did whatever they wanted, this place would fall apart. We have standards. We have property values to protect. You locked 2 people in their 70s on a boat for 6 hours because their boat was 8 inches too long? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 8 inches? And the other violations, Brenda insisted. The special assessment alone was $3,000, and they refused to pay. Because we couldn't afford it, Dad said, his voice weak. We're on a fixed income. We paid the regular HOA fees, but $3,000 for lighting we don't need? We had to choose between that and Mom's heart medication. That's not my problem, Brenda said. Everyone has to pay their share. More golf carts were arriving now, carrying what I assumed were other HOA board members. 4 people emerged, 3 women and 1 man, all looking confused and annoyed at being woken up. Brenda immediately started talking to them in urgent whispers, pointing at us accusingly. One of the women, a stern-looking redhead in her 60s, marched over to us. I'm Linda Patterson, HOA treasurer. Ms. Morrison says you're trying to intimidate the board. I want you to know we will not be bullied. No one's bullying anyone, Felicity said. Your president locked my in-laws on their boat for 6 hours. That's a crime. It's enforcement, Linda said firmly. We have rules for a reason. And we have laws for a reason, Officer Rodriguez interjected. You can't hold people prisoner because they owe you money. The male board member, a portly man with a comb-over, stepped forward. Now let's all calm down. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. The Caldwells just need to pay their fines, and we can all move on. There's no misunderstanding, I said. You locked my parents on their boat. My mother called me in tears at 3 a.m. My father injured himself trying to get out. This isn't a fine issue. This is criminal. Your parents should have paid their assessments, another board member chimed in, a thin woman who looked like she'd sucked a lemon. They've been freeloading on improvements everyone else paid for. Freeloading? Dad's voice rose, stronger now, with anger giving him energy. We've lived here for 2 years. We've paid every regular fee on time. We volunteer for the marina cleanup days. We help new residents learn the waterways. We're part of this community. We just couldn't afford an unexpected $3,000 charge. Then maybe you can't afford to live here, Brenda said coldly. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the other board members looked uncomfortable. Felicity pulled out her phone and made a call. Yes, hi, this is Judge Norton. I need to speak to someone in the district attorney's office about a criminal matter. Yes, I know it's 4 a.m. This is time sensitive. She paused. Thank you. Brenda paled. You can't call the DA. This is a civil matter. False imprisonment is criminal, Felicity said, her phone still to her ear. Hello, yes. I'm at Palmetto Harbor Marina in Mount Pleasant. We have a situation where HOA board members locked two elderly residents on their boat for approximately 7 hours now, demanding payment of fines before releasing them. Yes, I'll hold. The board members started talking among themselves in urgent whispers. I could see the reality of the situation starting to sink in. Officer Chen was taking statements from my parents, while Officer Rodriguez photographed the gates and locks. Maybe we acted hastily, Linda said carefully. Perhaps we could reach a compromise. There's no compromise, I said. You committed a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. We were just enforcing the rules, the portly man protested. We didn't hurt anyone. You locked my 74-year-old mother on a boat for 7 hours, I said, my voice shaking with fury I'd been holding back. She has high blood pressure. My father has arthritis and a bad knee. You had no idea if they had enough medication with them. What if one of them had had a heart attack? What if Dad had broken his leg falling instead of just bruising it? The thin woman looked genuinely worried now. We didn't think about that. No, you didn't think at all. You were so focused on your petty power trip that you didn't consider you were dealing with human beings. Felicity hung up her phone. The assistant DA is very interested in this case. They're sending someone out here now. Brenda's composure finally cracked. This is insane. We're volunteers. We're just trying to maintain community standards. We don't deserve to be treated like criminals. Then don't act like criminals, Felicity said simply. An older couple came walking down the dock from another boat, both in their robes and slippers. The man called out, "Tom, Sarah, are you okay? We heard shouting." "We're fine now, George," Dad called back. "The HOA locked us on our boat." "They what?" George looked shocked. "That's unconscionable." "Stay out of this, George," Brenda warned. "This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't. If you can do this to the Caldwells, you can do it to any of us." George looked at the other board members. "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. We're voting to remove this entire board." "You can't do that," Linda protested. "Yes, we can. It's in the bylaws. Any 20% of residents can call for a vote of no confidence." George was already on his phone. "I'm texting everyone on the dock. This ends now." More lights were coming on in boats along the docks. Word was spreading fast. The assistant district attorney arrived 20 minutes later, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hughes, who looked far too alert for 4:30 in the morning. She spent 15 minutes talking to my parents, then Officer Chen, then Felicity. She studied the locks and chains, took photos, and made extensive notes. Finally, she approached the board members, who were huddled together, looking increasingly worried. "I'm going to be straightforward with you," Patricia said. "What you did here constitutes false imprisonment under South Carolina law. You detained two people against their will, restricted their freedom of movement, and demanded money for their release. That's not only false imprisonment, but also potentially extortion." "We were just following the bylaws," Brenda said weakly. "The bylaws don't supersede criminal law. You can't imprison people. Period." Patricia looked at each board member in turn. "Here's what's going to happen. You're all going to be formally interviewed at the station. Based on those interviews, I'll determine whether to file criminal charges. At minimum, you're looking at false imprisonment charges for whoever physically placed those locks and whoever authorized it. Given the victim's age and medical conditions, we might also pursue elder abuse charges." "Elder abuse?" The portly man looked like he might faint. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You knew the Caldwells were in their 70s. You knew they'd been on that boat for hours. You refused to release them even when their son arrived. That demonstrates a reckless disregard for their well-being." Patricia consulted her notes. "Ms. Morrison, you told Officer Chen, and I quote, 'They'll be fine. They live on a boat. They have everything they need.' That shows you knew they were confined and chose to keep them that way." Brenda said nothing. "I want to make something else clear," Patricia continued. "The Caldwells have grounds for a substantial civil suit: false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, elder abuse, negligence. They could sue you individually and the HOA as an entity. Your homeowners insurance likely won't cover criminal acts, so you'd be personally liable for damages." The thin woman started crying. "I didn't want to do this. Brenda said it was the only way to get them to pay." "Don't say anything else," Linda hissed. "We need a lawyer." "Yes, you do," Patricia agreed. "I suggest you get one immediately. In the meantime, you're all coming to the station." Brenda made one last attempt at defiance. "You can't arrest all of us. We have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Chen said, pulling out his handcuffs. "I suggest you use it." Watching the board members being loaded into police cars was surreal. These were supposedly respectable people, community leaders, reduced to criminal suspects because they'd let their petty authority go to their heads. My parents looked exhausted. Mom was leaning heavily on Dad, and Dad was trying to hide how much his knee was hurting. Felicity insisted they go to the emergency room to be checked out, but they refused. "We just want to sleep," Mom said. "Can we stay with you tonight?" "Of course," I said. "But what about your stuff on the boat?" "We'll get it tomorrow," Dad said. "I can't look at that place right now." We drove back to Charleston as the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My parents fell asleep in the back seat almost immediately. Felicity held my hand as I drove, neither of us speaking. At home, we settled my parents in the guest room. They were asleep before I finished pulling the blinds. Felicity and I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through the window. "That was the most insane thing I've ever seen," I said finally. "And I watched you sentence a corrupt sheriff last year." "HOAs are dangerous," Felicity said quietly. "They're given just enough authority to be effective, but not enough oversight to prevent abuse. You get people like Brenda who treat it like their personal fiefdom, and suddenly you have situations like this." "Do you think they'll actually be charged?" Patricia seemed serious. "False imprisonment is a serious crime, and the fact that the victims were elderly makes it worse. At minimum, Brenda's looking at charges. The others might get deals if they cooperate." She sipped her coffee. "The civil case is going to be interesting." "You think my parents should sue?" "I think they have an obligation to sue, not for the money, though they deserve compensation, but because if the HOA doesn't face serious consequences, they'll do this to someone else. People like Brenda don't learn unless they're forced to." I thought about that. My parents weren't litigious people. Dad had always said lawsuits were a waste of time and energy. But Felicity was right. This wasn't just about my parents. "I'll talk to them," I said. My phone buzzed. It was a text from George, the man from the marina. "Emergency HOA meeting called for tomorrow 6 p.m. 47 residents signed petition for board removal. Your parents should be there." I showed Felicity the text. She nodded. "Good. Let the community handle the HOA side while the criminal justice system handles the crime side." That day was a blur. I called in sick to work at the architecture firm where I was a senior designer. Felicity had court in the afternoon and couldn't cancel, but she made several phone calls to colleagues about HOA law and elder abuse statutes before she left. My parents slept until noon, then woke up disoriented and shaky. Mom cried when she saw the news on my laptop. The local Charleston station had picked up the story. HOA, board members arrested after locking elderly couple on boat? "This is so embarrassing," Mom said. "Everyone's going to know." "Everyone should know," I said gently. "Mom, this wasn't your fault. They committed a crime." "But the things they're saying we did wrong, the boat being too long, the laundry, the visitors, maybe we should have been more careful." "Stop," I said firmly. "An 8-inch discrepancy on a boat length is nothing. Hanging laundry to dry is normal. Having visitors after 10 p.m. isn't a crime. None of those things justified what they did." Dad was quieter, staring at his coffee. Finally, he said, "We thought we were done. Done working, done proving ourselves, done fighting. We just wanted to sail and fish and watch the sunset. How did we end up here?" "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "You ran into people who abused their power. That's not on you." The doorbell rang. It was a reporter from the Post and Courier, Charleston's main newspaper. I told him we weren't commenting, but he left his card. Before the day was over, 3 more reporters called. The story was spreading. Felicity came home early with a stack of legal documents. I talked to Marcus Whitman. He's one of the best civil rights attorneys in South Carolina. He's very interested in your parents' case. "We haven't decided to sue," Dad said. "I know, but you should at least talk to him." Felicity sat down at the table with us. "Tom, Sarah, I need you to understand something. What happened to you was serious, not just annoying, or inconvenient. Serious. You were held against your will for 7 hours. That's traumatic. And the people who did it need to face consequences, or they'll do it to someone else. Brenda's already been arrested, Mom said. Isn't that enough? Criminal charges are separate from civil accountability. The criminal case punishes them for breaking the law. A civil case compensates you for your suffering and sends a message to every HOA in America that this behavior won't be tolerated. Dad looked at me. What do you think? I think Felicity's right. I think you should at least talk to the lawyer. The next day, we met with Marcus Whitman in his downtown Charleston office. He was a tall black man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He spent 2 hours asking my parents questions about the HOA, the timeline of events, their medical conditions, and their emotional state. This is one of the clearest cases of false imprisonment I've seen, he said finally. The HOA had no legal authority to detain you. The fact that they demanded money for your release makes it even worse. And the fact that you're elderly and have medical conditions adds another layer. What would a lawsuit entail? Dad asked. We'd sue the HOA entity and the individual board members who participated in the decision. We'd seek compensatory damages for your suffering, medical expenses, any therapy you need, and punitive damages to punish this behavior. We'd also seek injunctive relief to prevent this from happening to anyone else. How much are we talking about? Mom asked nervously. It's hard to say without discovery, but given the facts, I'd estimate you could recover anywhere from $500,000 to several $1 million. The punitive damages could be substantial because this was such egregious conduct. My parents looked shocked. Million? Dad repeated. You were imprisoned for 7 hours. You suffered emotional distress. Your son and his wife had to drive out in the middle of the night. You could have been seriously injured. And this was all done deliberately, with full knowledge of your age and health. Yes, $1 million or more is realistic. We don't want to bankrupt anyone, Mom said. The HOA has insurance, Marcus explained. They'll fight the claim, argue their insurance should cover it, but ultimately you're not taking money from individual homeowners unless the board members are found personally liable. And they should be. They made this choice. What's the timeline? I asked. I'd file within the week. The criminal case is already generating publicity, which helps. We'd go through discovery, probably settle before trial. Most cases like this settle because the defendants know they'll lose. I'd estimate 12 to 18 months total. My parents looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that only couples married for 50 years can have. We'll do it, Dad said finally. Not for the money, but because Felicity's right. If we don't stop them, they'll hurt someone else. Marcus smiled. That's the right reason. Let's get started. The emergency HOA meeting that evening was packed. The community clubhouse at Seaside Estates seated maybe 100 people, and there were at least 120 crammed in, with more standing outside. My parents were nervous about going, but I convinced them it was important. When we walked in, the room erupted in applause. People I'd never met came up to shake my parents' hands and hug them. George was there with his wife, and at least 30 other boat owners from the marina. We've been waiting for someone to stand up to them, one woman told my mother. Brenda and her cronies have been terrorizing this community for years. The meeting was called to order by the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Jeffrey Brooks who clearly wished he was anywhere else. He explained that with the board president and all board members under criminal investigation, the board was effectively dissolved. A vote had been called to elect an interim board until proper elections could be held. George stood up. Before we get to that, I want to say something. What happened to Tom and Sarah Caldwell is unacceptable. It's criminal and it's shameful. But it's not surprising. This board has been abusing its authority for years. Arbitrary fines, ridiculous rules, harassment of residents who question them. The Caldwells are just the first ones they went far enough with to face consequences. There were murmurs of agreement throughout the room. Another resident stood, a man in his 30s. I got fined $500 because my kayak was the wrong color. It was red. Apparently only earth tones are allowed. I didn't even know that rule existed. A woman in her 60s stood next. They fined me $1,000 for having a wreath on my door that was too large. It was 3 inches over their size limit. The stories kept coming. Fines for garden gnomes, fines for parking in your own driveway, fines for having guests park on the street. The HOA had been running the community like a police state, and everyone had been too afraid or too tired to fight back. "We need to completely rewrite the bylaws," George said. "We need oversight, term limits, and an appeals process. We need to make sure this never happens again." The vote for the interim board was unanimous. George was elected interim president, along with 4 other reasonable-sounding residents. Their first act was to suspend all pending fines, pending a review of every case from the past 2 years. Their second act was to formally apologize to my parents. George stood at the front of the room, looking directly at Mom and Dad. "Tom, Sarah, on behalf of this community, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. You deserved better. You deserve better. We're going to make this right." Mom was crying again, but this time they were good tears. The criminal case moved forward quickly. The district attorney's office, perhaps spurred by the media attention, prosecuted aggressively. Brenda Morrison was charged with false imprisonment, extortion, and elder abuse. Linda Patterson and 2 other board members who'd been present when the locks were placed were charged as accomplices. The portly man and the thin woman, who cooperated and testified against Brenda, received reduced charges. The trial was set for 6 months out, but 3 months in, Brenda's attorney approached the DA with a plea deal. She would plead guilty to false imprisonment in exchange for the other charges being dropped. She'd serve 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and perform 500 hours of community service. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board for 10 years. The other board members received similar deals with less jail time. My parents attended the sentencing. Brenda looked small and defeated in her orange jumpsuit, nothing like the aggressive woman who'd stood in the marina parking lot insisting she had the right to imprison people. The judge, a stern woman named Helena Torres, did not mince words. "Ms. Morrison, you abused a position of trust. You used your authority to harm vulnerable people. You showed no remorse until you faced consequences. You're fortunate the Caldwells weren't seriously injured, or you'd be facing much more serious charges. 6 months in jail is lenient considering what you did." Brenda's attorney tried to argue for house arrest instead, citing Brenda's clean record and community ties. Judge Torres wasn't having it. "The community she claimed to serve is better off without her in it. Sentence stands." The civil case took longer. Marcus Whitman filed a comprehensive complaint against the HOA, Brenda, Linda, and the other board members. The HOA's insurance company tried to deny coverage, arguing that criminal acts weren't covered. Marcus fought that, arguing the policy covered the board's actions in their official capacity. Discovery was brutal. Marcus deposed every board member, dozens of residents, and reviewed years of HOA records. What he found was shocking. The HOA had collected over $200,000 in fines over the past 3 years, most of them arbitrary and petty. Residents had been fined for things like having the wrong shade of white paint, flowers that bloomed too brightly, and doormats that were too decorative. This was a profit center, Marcus told us. They were using fines to pad the HOA budget so they didn't have to raise dues. It's completely illegal. The insurance company eventually agreed to cover the claim up to policy limits. They offered my parents $300,000 to settle. Marcus advised them to take it. "We could get more at trial," he said, "but it would take another year and there's always risk. This is a good settlement." My parents agreed, but they had conditions. Part of the settlement required the HOA to completely revise their bylaws, implement an independent appeals process for fines, and provide training for all board members on their legal limitations. The HOA also had to send a letter to every resident apologizing for the previous board's conduct and outlining the changes being made. "We want this to mean something," Dad said, "not just be about money." The settlement was finalized 14 months after that phone call in the middle of the night. My parents used some of the money to pay off their boat and set up a fund for medical expenses. They donated $50,000 to a nonprofit that advocates for HOA reform. The rest they saved. But the biggest change was in the community itself. George and the new board transformed Seaside Estates. Fines were reduced across the board and limited to genuine violations like safety hazards. The arbitrary aesthetic rules were eliminated. Residents could hang laundry, park in their driveways, and have guests without fear. The marina became a real community. Residents started having monthly potlucks. They organized group sales and fishing trips. My parents, who'd almost lost everything, became beloved members of the community. I visited them 6 months after the settlement was finalized. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and the marina was bustling with life. Kids were learning to sail. Someone was having a birthday party on one of the larger boats. Music drifted across the water. Mom and Dad were on the Sea Dreams deck, working on a jigsaw puzzle together. They looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen since before that awful night. "How are you doing?" I asked, settling into a deck chair. "Good," Dad said. "Really good, actually." "No nightmares?" Mom shook her head. "Not for a while now. The therapy helped, and knowing they can't do this to anyone else helps." Felicity had come with me, and she was watching the activity in the marina with a satisfied expression. "You did the right thing," she told my parents, "both in pressing charges and in suing. You created real change." "We couldn't have done it without you," Mom said. "If you hadn't been there that night, if you hadn't known the law, who knows what would have happened?" "You would have figured it out," Felicity said. "It just might have taken longer." George came walking down the dock, waving. "Tom, Sarah, we're having a board meeting tonight if you want to sit in. We're voting on whether to add kayak racks." "We'll be there," Dad called back. After George left, I said, "You're going to board meetings now?" "We are," Dad said. "Someone needs to keep an eye on things, make sure the new board doesn't turn into the old board." "Plus," Mom added with a smile, "we actually care about the kayak racks. They'd be useful." We sat there for a while, watching the boats rock gently in their slips, listening to the sound of the water and the gulls and the laughter from the birthday party. It was peaceful. It was what retirement was supposed to be. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "That night when you called me, were you scared they'd hurt you? Or just scared in general?" Mom thought about it. "Both, I guess. Mostly I was scared of how helpless we were. We'd worked our whole lives, saved our money, tried to be good people, and suddenly we were trapped, and there was nothing we could do. That's a terrible feeling." "I felt so old," Dad added quietly. "When I tried to climb that fence and my knee gave out, when I couldn't protect your mother, that's when it really hit me that we're not young anymore. We can't just power through things." "You don't have to power through," I said. "That's what family is for. That's what the law is for." "That's what Judge Norton is for," Mom said, reaching over to squeeze Felicity's hand. "Our secret weapon." Felicity laughed. "I prefer to think of myself as a very public weapon against injustice." We stayed until sunset, which painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. My parents pointed out the navigation markers in the channel and explained the tides and currents. They told us about their plans to sail down to Florida in the winter, maybe make it all the way to the Keys. They were making plans, looking forward, instead of looking back. That was good. As Felicity and I drove back to Charleston that evening, I thought about how close we'd come to a very different outcome. If Mom hadn't called me, if Felicity hadn't been there, if the police hadn't eventually taken it seriously, if the DA hadn't prosecuted, if the community hadn't stood up. "What are you thinking about?" Felicity asked. "How lucky we were," I said, "that you knew the law, that you were willing to fight." "It wasn't luck," she said. "It was just doing the right thing. Anyone would have done it." "No," I said. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have been intimidated by the HOA's authority, would have believed Brenda when she said they had the right to enforce their rules, would have accepted the police's initial response that it was a civil matter." "Then most people need to learn better," Felicity said firmly. "HOAs don't have unlimited power. They're bound by the same laws as everyone else. More people need to understand that." She was right, of course. The case had gotten enough media attention that it sparked conversations about HOA reform across South Carolina and beyond. Several state legislators proposed bills to limit HOA authority and provide better protections for homeowners. Some passed, some didn't, but the conversation was happening. My parents' case became a teaching example in law schools. Felicity was invited to speak at a conference on property law and HOA governance. Marcus Whitman started a practice focusing on HOA abuse cases. The ripples spread outward. A year later, I got a call from a man in Texas. His elderly father had been fined by his HOA for having an American flag that was too large. The HOA was threatening to put a lien on his house. He'd read about my parents' case and wanted advice. I connected him with Marcus, who connected him with a Texas attorney who specialized in HOA cases. The father won. The HOA backed down when they realized he was willing to fight. That happened a lot. Once people knew they could fight back, they did. HOA boards became more cautious, more reasonable. They couldn't hide behind the assumption that homeowners wouldn't push back. My parents became minor celebrities in the HOA reform movement. They were interviewed by consumer advocacy groups and homeowner rights organizations. They told their story at community meetings and helped other elderly residents understand their rights. Who knew getting locked on our boat would turn into a second career, Dad joked. But they were good at it. They were sympathetic and relatable. They weren't radical activists or troublemakers. They were just normal people who'd been wronged and had fought back. That resonated. 2 years after that terrible night, I was back at the marina for my parents' anniversary party. They'd been married 52 years, and the whole community turned out to celebrate. Someone had strung lights across the docks. There was a potluck dinner with enough food to feed an army. A local band played soft rock covers. Brenda Morrison was out of jail by then, serving out her probation. I heard she'd moved to another state, trying to start over. I didn't waste much thought on her. She'd made her choices and faced the consequences. Linda Patterson was there, though. She'd been one of the board members charged as an accomplice, and she'd served 3 months in jail. When she got out, she came back to the community and immediately started volunteering. Not on the board, she was banned from that, but helping with maintenance and cleanup. She'd apologized to my parents dozens of times. She approached them hesitantly at the party. "Tom, Sarah, I just wanted to say again how sorry I am, and to thank you." "Thank us?" Mom said, surprised. "For not destroying my life," Linda said quietly. "You could have pushed for harsher punishment, could have made sure I lost everything. But you didn't. You gave me a chance to make amends." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Dad said, "as long as they learn from their mistakes." "I learned," Linda said. "I promise you I learned." After she walked away, I asked, "Do you believe her?" "I do," Mom said. "She's been different, humbler, more human." "Not everyone who does something wrong is irredeemable," Dad added. "Some people just get caught up in group mentality and lose sight of what matters." Linda got caught up in Brenda's crusade and forgot she was dealing with real people. Felicity joined us, carrying plates of food. "Beautiful night," she said. "Beautiful life," Mom corrected. "We're lucky." "You're not lucky," I said. "You fought for this, for the right to live in peace in the place you love. You earned it." George gave a toast, talking about how my parents' courage had changed the community for the better, how they'd turned something terrible into something meaningful, how Seaside Estates was now a place where people looked out for each other instead of looking for reasons to fine each other. "To Tom and Sarah," he said, raising his glass, "and to standing up for what's right." The crowd echoed, "To Tom and Sarah." Later, when the party was winding down and most people had drifted back to their boats, I sat with my parents and Felicity on the Sea Dream's deck. The harbor was quiet, just the gentle lap of water against hulls and the distant sound of music from someone's radio. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked. "Sometimes," Mom admitted, "but not with fear anymore, more with gratitude." "Gratitude?" "That we survived it, that we had you and Felicity to help us, that we found out what this community really was underneath all of Brenda's nonsense, that we learned we're stronger than we thought." She smiled. "Getting locked on your own boat is a pretty low moment, but look where we are now." Dad raised his coffee mug. "To low moments that lead to high ground." We touched our mugs together, and I felt a sense of peace. Not everything had gone perfectly. My parents still had moments of anxiety. The legal battles had been stressful. The publicity had been intrusive at times, but they'd come through it. More than that, they'd made it mean something. They hadn't just been victims who got justice. They'd been catalysts for change. Because of them, other elderly homeowners knew they had rights. Other HOA boards thought twice before abusing their authority. Other communities had reformed their bylaws. One phone call at 3 in the morning had changed everything. But not just for my parents, for everyone who'd been suffering under petty tyrants with clipboards and too much time on their hands. As we sat there in the peaceful marina, watching the stars reflect on the dark water, I realized that sometimes the worst moments create the most important changes. Sometimes you have to face injustice to recognize it, and you have to fight it to defeat it. My parents hadn't asked to be heroes. They just wanted to live on their boat and watch the sunset. But when they were forced to fight, they fought with everything they had. And they won. Not just for themselves, but for everyone. That was worth celebrating. That was worth everything. The night ended with my parents walking Felicity and me back to our car. Dad was moving better now, his knee fully healed. Mom looked younger somehow, lighter. The stress and fear that had aged her that terrible night had melted away. "Drive safe," Mom said, hugging us both, "and thank you for everything." "We didn't do anything special," Felicity said. "You knew the law when we needed someone who knew the law," Dad said. "You stood up for us when we couldn't stand up for ourselves. That's everything." As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. My parents were walking back down the dock hand in hand, their silhouettes outlined against the dock lights. They looked happy. They looked free. That's all anyone really wants, I thought, to be free to live their life in peace without someone with a clipboard and a power complex making it miserable. My parents had that now, and because they'd fought for it, a lot of other people had it too. Sometimes justice takes a federal judge and a determined attorney and criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. Sometimes it takes standing up to bullies who've been allowed to run roughshod over people for too long. Sometimes it takes a phone call at 3 in the morning and the courage to say, "This isn't right," but it's always worth it. Always. As we merged onto the highway back to Charleston, Felicity reached over and took my hand. "Your parents are remarkable people," she said. "They are," I agreed. "They really are." And they were. Not because they'd done anything extraordinary, but because when the moment came, when they had to choose between accepting injustice and fighting it, they chose to fight. Even though they were tired and scared and in their 70s and just wanted peace, they fought, and they won, and that made all the difference.